Uh, good. Happy Tuesday, everyone. This is March 15, 2022, and this is the release engineering meeting for Kubernetes SIG release. As a reminder, this is a meeting governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which means be awesome to each other. And as a reminder, all of what we'll be talking about today, it's going to be recorded and shared publicly on the internet. So be mindful of what you say and do on the recording. And so let's start the meeting for today. I don't think we have anybody new on the call, but if anyone wants to say hi, feel free to do so while I check out the agenda items. All right. So we have like a pretty, well, no agenda topics for today. But if anyone wants to drop something on the document, feel free to do so. And meanwhile, we can start with an update from the release manager. So I don't know if someone wants to do that.
I can go ahead with the short update. So we are cutting like patch releases tomorrow. I mistakenly wrote like 3 releases in the notes, but I'll correct them. So we're cutting 3 patch releases tomorrow, and next week we have one pre-release alpha.4 for Kubernetes 1.24. So in terms of cutting releases, we are there. But anyone else wants to add anything on behalf of release managers, please?
I just want to point out. That James was like, "Yeah," and then he yawned, and that is just like quintessential. Like what? Like that's the packaging of like running a release. So thank you, James.
Thanks for calling me out like that, Stephen.
All right, and are you handling the patch releases tomorrow, Navron, or who is assigned to it?
Yeah, I'm assigned to all 3 of them. So Carlos created those threads, thanks to him. So I'll start staging those releases early, afternoonish in my time, and probably Google build admins would be available later on in the night, so I'd let them like sign the DVN and RPM repos later on, and we can do the announcement at night. Shouldn't be much of an issue.
So let's get let's confirm their availability for tomorrow ahead of tomorrow. And I'd also like you to grab a release manager associate if possible, as well as a backup release manager or a further afield time zone release manager to pick up the rest of the release. So let's confirm that in the chat when we have a chance.
Yeah, I'll ask in the thread itself, since the thread is up. I'll just tag the Slack group and ask people who would be willing to carry forward.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Any questions for the release managers about the patch releases or the upcoming release? Okay, so no further questions. So we don't have any topics on the agenda for today. Perhaps we can walk the board a little bit. I just wanted to give a brief update on the signing MVP, which we're conducting and collectively developing. So the MVP, probably we can share it later in the chat, but is like the minimum code required to start signing the container images for the releases. It's moving forward pretty well. All of the code necessary to bring the 6 store libraries to start signing is already in place. The the pull request to start signing in the release process when we stage the images is already has already emerged. I did some tests over the weekend, and images are getting signed there. And so right now, the final stretch of work lies within the image promoter. Most of it is already done. I was doing some tests yesterday, and I thought there were going to be some problems with the authentication, but it turns out that the promoter has a whole system of using service account that is not used, which I thought was going to be a problem, but it turns out that some of that code, which is built inside of the promoter to gain some identities, is there for some reason that escapes me, and I don't think it's used anywhere. But if I'm going to try to find a way to test without skipping this part of the authentication, and if we have a successful run without having to modify that part of the authentication, then we may be in a good position to start the next 124 pre-release next week. Mhm.
Just to clarify, this is discovery following the leads meeting.
Yeah. So
Okay, all right,
yes, exactly. Yeah. So yesterday I shared like very grim news because I thought that it wasn't going to work. But after further investigation yesterday, it turns out that there's code inside the promoter that to generate service account tokens, and then using that to do the requests. But I was following all of the paths yesterday. I'm not done yet, but I'm 90% sure that isn't used anywhere, and the promoter is only using the workload identity that it inherits from the pod it is running in. So let's see.
So I'm gonna do the mad scientist thing and say, delete the code and see what happens. We have so the code that was there. So I mean, basically the way the promoter manifests are laid out, right? If you think about it, if you think about the single case, right? Just one staging repository to one promotion ground, right? Then you need to specify where it's coming from, where it's going, right? And how it's getting there, right? Means of authentication. The promoter initially ran on, and I mean, some of this is probably still true, but the promoter initially ran using G-Cloud commands, right? So it's seeding the service, it's seeding the service count token because that's just initially how it was configured, right? So there's a service account token path laid out in the promotion jobs themselves, right? So it picks up that secret and then uses it for the promotion. Given that we've moved a lot of the, or I won't say a lot, but maybe enough of the code to not use G-Cloud, right? And to use GCR directly, some of the authentication stuff that you've done recently, we may be like skating right over the local authentication flows, right? Which is fine, right? Ideally, you want to be using ADC for this, right? Or application default credentials for folks, where the application is knowledgeable enough about the environment to understand what credentials it should be using, right? So in this case, we probably have gotten to the point where we're using ADC because you've added the code around the keychains, right? So that's a possibility. I would start deleting the use service token question mark code and see what happens.
Yeah, so there are, I would say, 3 ways that it does authentication. One is the application default credentials. Then there is the service account that gets seeded that is listed in the manifest. And then there is another, in fact, I have it open here. There is another, there's a flag that is called use service account. Yeah, I think it's, yes, use service account. And that is the third one. And if you see the code that builds the requests to that it does to the registry, it has
There's a
some,
there's a maybe use service account, and if
Yeah.
that flag is set, it'll flip it on, and then you're kind of forced through the G Cloud flow as opposed to ADC. So
Exactly.
I would just start deleting that code. See what happens.
Exactly, because that code that actually generates and populates tokens from using G Cloud comes from that flag use service account. And I don't think, I'm pretty sure at this point that that isn't used anywhere. But I was going to suggest that maybe simply trying it out without trying the promote to run the promoter without that and see what happens. But we can do the even more radical thing, which is just delete it and see what happens.
Delete the code. So
Okay.
so there's also an argument to be made for well, if you think about the manifest in general, right? We have so we have two, I'll be more verbose for folks who don't know how some of the stuff is laid out, right? So within Kates.io, right? The Kates.io repo, Kates.io, right? There is a Kates.gcr.io directory. Within the Kates.gcr.io directory, there is a folder, there's one directory, images, there's another one, manifests, right? The manifests directory contains, so basically the entirety of Kates.gcr.io directory is the manifest, right? The manifest that we send, the manifest that the promoter actually uses is the aggregate of all of the manifests therein, right? So what's in images versus what's in manifests, they're both stubs of the full manifest for that staging repository, right? So what's happening in the manifest side is that's the stub that is defining authentication. It's defining the source and destination repositories for the various staging manifests, right? So you're going to see source, and then you'll see like 3 destinations, which will be each of the US, the US, the EU, and the Asia endpoints for our production. Our production image repository, right? So with the service accounts, well, like one could have argued a while ago, right? Because we're using the same service count anywhere, that flow is irrelevant, right? We're going to be using the same auth for all of the staging repositories. The requirement is that the promoter have access to all of the staging repositories, which has been true for a while, right? So this, the jumping between, like needing to select based on, based on which staging repository we're in, doesn't really make sense anymore. If we were using different staging repositories in different productions and we wanted to segment access in certain ways, like maybe that would make sense. But where we're at is the assumption is that the promoter is going to have full access to all of the staging repositories. If that's not true, something's broken in the flow. So I would say any logic that reasons about switching between service accounts for the sake of doing promotion isn't needed.
Okay, that was going to be my question. So it says somewhere in the, I don't know, I don't remember if it's in the code somewhere or in the documentation, that you can specify even a service account to read the source registry in case the source registry is not public. But if so, the easiest scenario for us is a public source registry that the promoter can have access to without any authentication whatsoever. And then using the same service account, ideally the service account that the pod uses, to publish the promote the images. If we can rely on that fact, then we can strip like lots of code and and simplify the code a lot. But I'm not sure if that is, we can rely on not breaking anyone by assuming that.
So I would say that you know, I would say that for the promoter, there are what's that phrase, right? It's something about any piece of your, any piece of your API that you expose, people will use, and in unexpected ways. We have exposed a lot in the promoter for usage that has, to the best of my knowledge, not been used. So we're kind of in this like nice reverse situation where I think it's fine to shutter some aspects of the API because we're the consumer of it and we don't use that.
Okay, so maybe we could simply disable it. Maybe.
Yeah, we can outright delete the code. We can disable the code path.
Okay. All right, so that puts us in a very much easier position to move things forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so well, thanks for that. And I don't know if there are any questions about or doubts of how the promoter works or the work that's needed there.
Eddie, you want to comment there?
No, this is not Kubernetes related. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Because I was like, I was gonna send you the eyes emoji several times.
Okay. So, well, so that's it. So there are two main things left to do on the promoter. One, take the signatures from staging and promote those along the images. And the second one is really ensure that the authentication works. The end-to-end tests do work. So based on the conversation we've been having today, maybe it works as is. So we just need to find a way to actually test it and make sure we're on the right track.
Oh, there was a third thing or fourth, I don't know. But based on the conversation, yes, and something that I was chewing on, we have a way of kind of testing fake prod, and we do that. We do the and I might be about to answer your question, Arno. So Arno was asking in the chat, how do we verify images signed with a keyless process? So we have a means of kind of testing the expectations via the end-to-end test so like there's a baseline end-to-end test for the promoter, and then there's a test for the auditor, right? To make sure nothing has diverged from expectations. Now, what happens with each of those tests is the tests are set to basically like max run 1, right? Because when you run the EDE, so if you've ever noticed you're working on the promoter code and you've noticed that like the EDEs have not started for your PR, it's because the EDE tests are limited to 1 run. So there's probably another PR somewhere that's running at the time, right? And the reason for that is as part of the EDEs, we scaffold a set of images for the test, and then we blow them up at the end, right? So every promoter run will stand up a bunch of images in a fake prod, and then remove them afterwards, right? So my suggestion is that we get what that means is that we're able to test some of the functionality within the EDEs, but not necessarily like what it looks like for these images to hang around for a while, right? So if there are any later on tests that we want to do, like verifying the images that are signed, it is harder to do that on a long-term basis as opposed to a one-off PR basis, right? So my suggestion was going to be that we stand up, we kind of segment the start subdividing some of the aspects of fake prod into an EDE and EDE auditor section, and then also a canary section, right? So the EDE auditor repos would get deleted on every run, right? The canary section would stay around, right? And what we would do is keep a set of fake promoter manifests, if you will, real promoter manifests, but ones that are targeting that canary repository instead, right? That way we can test. That way we can roll forward because when we need to do a promoter upgrade, when we're promoting the promoter, essentially what we do is we cut a release, we promote that image, and then slowly roll that out across each of the jobs that are using the promoter, right? So there are 3 primary jobs that are using the promoter, to the best of my knowledge at this point. It's the post submit that runs on Kates.io, right? So it's probably like post Kates.io CIP promo or something like that, right? Our image promo, right? And then there's a periodic, right? That's probably like CI Kates.io image promo, right? And Arno has linked to them in the chat. Thank you, Arno. So those 2, the first one will run immediately after a change has happened, change has merged to the promoter manifests. The periodic will run hourly. I think it's hourly right now, to play catch up in case any of the post submits have failed, right? And then the third is Prow also does separate image promotion. So there's a Prow job that I mean, there's yet another job, but specifically for Prow, that will do their image promotion, right? So so that means, like, you know, when we're doing the bumps, we'll often like upgrade the post submit or the periodic first, let that run for a time, and then upgrade the other one, and then get to the Prow one, right? With a canary repository in place, what we can do is roll forward the images immediately on those jobs. Watch for bad things, right? Against these fake manifests, watch for bad things to happen, and then choose a time to actually upgrade the production jobs. So.
All right, but we still need to set up the canary images, or is there a set that we can use right now? I don't think so, right?
I mean, we could, so right now the promo tools repo has a bunch of fake images to use already, right? So we can just push those as well. We could have the job also create the images, but we can just push the tars that are already in promo tools, and just keep them around. We could choose to say, like, every 4, 6, 12, 24 hours, we'll wipe that registry so that the promotion can happen again, right? But yeah, we can add thoughts.
Yeah, I was trying to think. So usually the images in the E2Es, they remain in the test registries. They get deleted when the test starts, so they can be used for testing. But since any failing tests may cause them to not be there, I think it's safer to copy them to another one.
Yeah,
I mean, it could be in the same project, just in a different repository. And
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we subdivide, so fake prod gets subdivided into like E to E auditor, and then canary, right?
Mhm.
And then we tell the EDEs and we tell the EDEs for the promoter and the auditor to only wipe their portion of the registry, the registry. And then we keep the canary one around, and we only wipe the canary one every 4, 6, 12, 24, however, whatever the frequency is, so that we can run the promoter. We have a periodic running in the background, and we can just keep running it. So
Okay,
that
so
one is the, that one can use the, we can, if we're not already, which I think we are, so, every push to main for promo tools should generate a new image, right? And what we do is just we just use latest all the time, right?
just for testing. Okay, yeah.
Exactly, we use latest all the time, so we know, like, okay, if we're considering a release, the first thing we're gonna do outside of like cutting tags is, like, one, we're gonna drain the queue of any open PRs, but we're also gonna look at that job to see if it's failing, right?
Okay, sounds good.
Cool.
And the other I was also planning on modifying the E2Es. So if I remember correctly, the E2Es push 2 sets of images. I think they're called Golden Foo and Golden Bar. And then from there, I was thinking maybe creating a third set of images and sign those to test the actual copying of images during the promotion. So not to alter the first 2 sets, which already have tests against them, and create a new one. I don't know if that makes sense.
I mean, I think, yeah. So, foo and bar are testing different cases. So in some cases, like we're trying to promote by digest, or, in some cases we may be trying to, or it may be, it may be a tagless image or something. Yeah, there are a few different cases that are run. I'm completely fine with creating another set of cases for signing specifically, but ideally we're trying to sign, ideally we're trying to sign them all. But let's look into what the cases are before we make a decision there.
Yeah. But this is just for testing the copying of images that were signed at the source, not the signing that we're going to be adding after that. So this would be the case for the images that Krell signs during staging, because we're going to have projects submitting images for promotion that do not have signatures
That are
on
not
them.
signed. Exactly. Yeah.
And then
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, and then we have to also add testing for the signatures that we have after. So that's another one, which, by the way, I haven't yet considered. But
yeah, I would say for the explicit case of these images or have come to us pre-signed, then yes, it should be its own case. But once we start talking about the promoter signing on the whole, that should apply to every image.
Yeah.
Or that should apply to
absolutely.
every case, right?
So there was a question the other day on the release engineering channel about maybe Knative using the promoter for their images, and that got me thinking. So we should probably wire some configuration somewhere to. Well, point one, I'm not sure if someone somewhere is using the promoter already, and perhaps those persons may wish to have the signing turned off, and then because right now there are no buttons to flick the signing off. And on the second point here is we should also have a way to configure which service account is going to provide the identity to sign the images, which we already, but right now it's hard coded in the patch to the provider. So maybe
Yeah, I think ultimately we want as many of those things parameterized as possible. And yeah, I mean that that should be fine. If someone else wants to use it, I think it'd be useful to have not Kubernetes kick the tires on it to get an idea of what is missing. Because we're kind of insulated in that we're only building this for ourselves right now, right? But yeah, theoretically, anyone should be able to use it.
Yeah, I mean, it's simply a matter of fact, just passing the service account ID in a feature flag or whatever, and we're done. Okay, so any other questions about the image promotion or?
I mean, do we want it to just, do we want it to just derive the service account from the environment? Because then you don't really have to do anything, right?
How would you do that? Like using the
If it's using workload identity or something like that, then,
well, that would break us. So because if we're not signing using the same identity that runs that runs
right.
in
Okay.
the application default credential. So
You could if it's running in the right environment, though, right? The right
yeah,
environment, the right permissions for the workload identity, it could be done, right?
it could be done, absolutely, yes. But okay, so we could default to that. That could be a
Yeah, we default to that, and then whatever the special case is, if we're the special case, right? I think ideally it should be able to do everything it needs to get done running in the right environment with the right credentials. We shouldn't have to reason too hard about the credentials outside of saying these are the permissions that your identity needs to get this done. If you don't have this configured, image promotion will not work. You can overwrite this by doing this flag or that flag or this, this config within the manifest. But by default, it will try to do workload identity and keyless.
Yeah, so just to leave this here for in the recording, it's the way it works right now is the way it works is it will use the identity that it's running on the workload identity, and using that it will generate the tokens using the signing identity. So there are no keys involved except for just obtaining the tokens and using those for signing. Okay.
And developer guy has dropped a nice link to how to verify container images with Kubernetes. It sounds like the usage of cosign GCP KMS workload identity. I have to drop for an internal call, but I will catch you all on the interwebs later.
All right, thank you, Steven. Okay, so just so that anyone, I think Arno posed a question in the chat before. If someone wants to see the image, so right now you cannot verify the images. In the usual case, you cannot verify the images that go on that get signed during testing because they leave the signing PR is not merged yet. So whenever the periodic tests that Steven said mentioned run, they wipe out the signed images and replace them with non-signed images, which is from what is running now. But I just triggered the end-to-end on the PR, and if you do the call that I'm dropping in the chat right now, you can see the actual. Well, you need to have the cosign binary installed in your machine, but if you run that, you can take a look at the signed image, which is published right now. There is still one there is still one bit missing. If you see the data that gets signed, you will see that the Docker reference is right now hard coded to one of the mirrors. in the case that I dropped there is the US mirror. So it's usgcr.io. And these images get published to US, Asia, and EU. So I'm thinking that perhaps we need to find a way to maybe include the other references inside of the blob that gets signed. That is not required for the signatures for validation whatsoever, but I think it would be nice to ensure that the manifest covers all the mirrors. All right. Okay, so I think that covers some of the updates on the MVP. I don't know if there's any questions or any other suggestions about that. Okay. So that's okay. So that's I'm hopeful that we can get these changes in place to get the pre-release signed next week. And just a quick advertisement will be next Friday on DGI Kubernetes. I will be there to present some of this stuff, hopefully in a more practical and visual fashion. So if anyone wants to tune in, I'm in support and bring some of those questions and suggestions. I'll be happy to see you there. So with that, maybe anyone has any other questions around other topics that you may want to bring to today's meeting? Okay, so I'm assuming that's a no. So, all right, so maybe we can get 5 minutes back and see you on the next call. And thank you all for coming.
Have a good one, everybody.